Welcome once again, all rogue revolutionaries and rebels, to another installment of the Rogue Blog. This time, both June and July, we're going to be talking about visual storytelling because it's that important a topic. This month, June, is the sort of reasons, the rational thinking behind the power of visual storytelling. I'm going to give you some facts about storytelling that you can take back with you. I'm going to show you some data that proves that what I'm telling you can take to the bank. And then I'm going to give you three free tips on how to apply what you've learned about visual storytelling back in the office to make your job easier and to make what you communicate more powerful. And again, all that for free because Rogue believes in changing the conversation around water and the way that human beings perceive the value of water. And whether you know it or not, you're in that fight with us. So we thank you. And this is one of the ways we try to thank you. Good information. So first, when we're talking about visual storytelling, WTF, what do we mean? Textbook definition of visual storytelling is the strategic convergence of art and symbol. All of this for the strategic purpose of making stories that we tell better. In other words, in the context of text or words, we incorporate visuals that mean something, right? That are imbued innately with meaning. And the selection, the way we craft those visuals, is also imbued with meaning. It says something about the maker and the audience, and that is symbol. And together, those things make a good story great. And we're going to show you how to do that. But first, why does this work? In a rational sort of point-to-point kind of way, road trip kind of way, if you will, how do we know this works? Well, it's been studied endlessly. And the equation, although it looks kind of complicated, is really quite simple. What science has discovered is that visual storytelling, better than any other modality, takes that which is complex information, and most of the stories we're telling are by necessity complex, right? We don't usually sweat over crafting a story around simple information, but things like rate increases, talking about water quality, reporting, these things can be very complex and uninteresting to our audience, and visual storytelling, better than any other modality, makes it simple. Once it's simple, our audience can understand it. Once they can understand it, they're more likely to give us their attention because it's of interest to them. It affects their lives, and they understand that now. Once we have their attention, then we can communicate our story, generate a desired emotion in our residents and our audience, and then have some impact. And through that impact comes change, comes outcome. How do we know this? Well, here are some ancillary science-based facts about visual storytelling versus some other modes and in and of itself. And you can extrapolate for yourself the power of visual storytelling just from these few facts. First, the human brain only needs 13 milliseconds to consume, digest, and analyze an image. That's 60 times faster than it takes the human brain to consume, digest, and understand text. 90% of the brain is already conditioned to process visuals, not text. Comprehension of visuals and recall of the information contained in them is 65% versus 10% for only text. Storytelling itself is the only thing that is exclusive, unique, and innately human. There is no other being on the planet that we know of or that we understand to tell story except for us. And there's something magical, even if we don't understand what it is, we know it is magical about our ownership of story. And then there's the psychopharmacology of story. Long story short, a number of studies were done, and ultimately a book was written that contained this outcome, which shows that pharmacologically and otherwise, the chemicals in our brain, the chemical reaction that happens in our brain when we hear and see a story, is exactly the same proportionately as the chemical reactions that happen when we fall in love. Now, that's magical too. So again, this month, this part one, we're talking about the science and reason behind visual storytelling. I'm going to give you the introduction I just did. We're going to look at some styles of story, and then I'm going to give you your free tips. July is going to be the second part, the art and the emotion, the power behind visual storytelling. We're going to talk about the elements and how to make our stories go from good to great. So types of story, visual stories. The first is static, right? It could be a static image like you might see in a print ad. The second type is a dynamic image. This could be a GIF, right? That you get or send online. This could be a film, a TV show, anything that is motion picture. The third is that one step further beyond motion picture, which is interactivity, right? Creating something that invites the audience, the residents, whomever you might be communicating with, to communicate back to you, to join the conversation, to co-create the story with you. And as you might imagine, it by far is the most powerful style. So what does all this mean? The free tips. What does this all mean for you if you are a communicator who works in-house, right? You maybe work at a water utility, but the key differentiator here is that you do this either by yourself or with a small team, and you do it in-house. You don't hire an agency. You don't hire contractors outside of yourself to do most of the communicative work. First thing it means, and the first tip is always, always, always veer toward thinking about story, toward crafting a visual story. In other words, if something is going out that is strictly text, add visuals to it. Try to balance text with visual at the very least. And to the extent possible, try to tell most of your stories through visuals, infographics, charts, whatever they may be. Film, right? Video is the most powerful form of it. But again, tip number one, balance. If there's text, there has to be compelling visuals. If there are compelling visuals, there does not have to be text. Free tip number two, and this goes to the types of visual communications. Reach for the stars, right? Static is good if that's what we can do. Dynamic or moving image is better if that's what we can do. But the best is always to invite the audience in some way to join the conversation, to be talked with instead of talked at. A simple way we can do that is simply to ask for their feedback in everything. If it's a piece of communication, some kind of collateral, for example, that's a requirement, you have to do it. First, make it interesting and make it visual, and then ask the recipient for feedback and do it boldly. Don't hide it in small print at the bottom of the last fold in the try, right? Make it a point to ask them, what are your thoughts? Do you have any reactions to this? What's your feedback on this message and the way it was delivered? Simply asking your audience for their feedback, letting them know that you are willing to listen and co-create with them if they are willing to do so with you, is a huge step in the right direction in terms of developing a relationship, a meaningful relationship with your residences and your audience, which is the point of communications, right? And the third tip, don't beat yourself up, right? Everything isn't going to be interactive, and everything isn't going to be, some super complicated motion picture video, right? Do the best you can and seek to elevate the work with each iteration, right? Each project you do, make it a little better, a little more visual, a little more interactive than the next time. It's through incremental attempts, incremental successes that real change, lasting change happens. For those of you who work with agency partners, it gets a little simpler, or at least some of the responsibility leaves your table. But the buck stops at the client. And so for you, your three tips: ask the agency, be not critical in a negative way, but think critically of the work of the agency in such a way that that you ask them those things that the in-housers must ask themselves. Ask your agency, is there a way to make this static image dynamic? Is there a way to make this dynamic image interactive? Is there a way to better balance visuals with the text here? Is there a better way to make more simple the message? Oftentimes, analogy and metaphor are the places where we find it both most simple and most effective to distill a complex message. Second point, to the extent you can, force the agency to elevate, right? On the next project, let's plan on the next project to make this more interactive, more dynamic, more visual, whatever the case may be. And then third, don't take your agencies, although I know how expensive they can be and it can be tempting, don't take their word as gospel. I don't mean be confrontational or look for problems. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is you need to go out there and look at the great visual stories being told in cinema, on television, in other communicative channels, advertising, for example, and of course in water, to know where the bar is, right? And while it's the agency's job to know your business, to know your brand, to know how to tell a story in your voice, it's your job to make sure the agency understands those things. So do not be afraid, third free tip, to go out and do your own research and bring it back to the agency. You're doing them a favor. I was a creative in advertising for 2 decades. And there's nothing I appreciate more than a client who is a co-conspirator, a collaborator, and not someone who just wants to sit at the other side of a boardroom table, write checks and pass the buck, right? So good luck to you all as you go back to your offices and seek to apply these learnings. I look forward to seeing you all in July, where we'll deliver some information about how to really lasso and leverage the emotional power of visual storytelling. As always, thanks to each and every one of you rogue revolutionaries and rebels. We'll see you next time. Thank you.